Bob Herbert's OpEd.tv is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation with the support of Ann Ulnick. Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. If the United States of America were to look in a mirror, it would notice quite a change. We are becoming ever more diverse. In 2011, for the first time ever, there were more babies from racial and ethnic minority groups born in the United States than white babies. By mid-century, when today's youngest children will only be in their 30s, whites will no longer be a majority in America. The implications of these demographic changes are profound. Great benefits will result, and there will be great challenges. All of that is explored in an important new book, Our Compelling Interests: The Value of Diversity for Democracy and a Prosperous Society. The editors of that book are my guests. They are Nancy Cantor, a leading American educator and the chancellor of Rutgers University, Newark, and Earl Lewis, also a national leader in education, and he is the president of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Let's provide a little context. I guess, Dr. Cantor, maybe we'll start with you. Can you describe some of the most significant demographic changes that are underway right now?
Well, so it's very clear that we have a demographic explosion in terms of racial and ethnic minority groups. The other piece that's so important is that we have real intersectionality. It's a very fluid map. So it's not the old binary. It's not the black, non-black,
right,
the black, white. It's really a very fluid map. And that means that we really have to take into account the different ways that people identify and the different ways that people interact or don't interact.
Right.
But what's so important is that we have an aging white population and an exploding non-white population in that sense.
Dr. Lewis, we'll get to specifics in a moment, but what are some of the general implications for the society of this demographic explosion?
Well, there are at least two, maybe three things I would highlight at the beginning. One is we think about the baby boom generation aging.
My generation.
My generation. and my generation
all
as well.
Generations.
We're all part of it. And you sort of think about who's going to replace us. And you think about the prosperity of America being dependent upon a new generation of workers and the talent that they can bring to the fore to actually continue to advance the society. That's part of what we want to actually sort of alert and put on the table for questioning and examination. So that's one part. The second part is then where this actually will occur. We talk about this demographic transition, but you actually see a lot of it along the coast. Along the western coast, California, Washington, Oregon, along the Gulf Coast and Texas, and then coming up the eastern seaboard. So what happens in the middle of the country?
Right.
And do we want actually two Americas, one that's a coastal America and one that's sort of this middle America? We have to actually begin to think through this demographic transition and the implications for all of our futures.
Now, the more we hear about diversity or talk about diversity, the more some other terms seem to be getting left behind. I'm thinking about integration, for example. I'm talking about assimilation, a word we almost never hear anymore, and even multiculturalism. And I noticed in one of the chapters in your book, there's a suggestion that assimilation and multiculturalism as terms have been discredited. I'd like to know how widespread that belief is and whether you agree with that.
So I think one thing about assimilation and multiculturalism is, let's take assimilation first, is that it may be most appropriate when you think of a very small ethnic or racial minority group, minority in that sense, right? It no longer could possibly describe this demographic explosion that we have. What are we assimilating to? We have so many rich and nuanced and overlapping dimensions of racial and ethnic difference, right? So that's on the one hand. And then in terms of multiculturalism, I think the issue there is that it has a kind of essentialism, as Danielle Allen says in her chapter in the book, meaning that it acts as if culture and race and ethnic groups are fixed. They're just bounded, right? When in fact what we have is a lot of overlapping and very nuanced and rich ways in which different identities intersect. And so it isn't multiculturalism that is wrong in that sense. I wouldn't say it's discredited in that sense. I would say that it's become more nuanced.
Right.
That in fact, what we have to do is build those ties.
Yeah, and in some ways, perhaps the most apt metaphor is the thing most of us who grew up in the 1950s and 1960s were presented with the idea that America was a melting pot.
Right.
And that this melting pot would sort of blend all of the constituent pieces together. In the end, you would have something that was indistinguishable. It was this, whatever was in that pot. And we moved that metaphor almost to now, no, America is more like a salad bowl. And where you actually can, you can see the tomatoes, and you can see the carrots, and you can see the radishes, and you can see the different kinds of lettuces. They each can stand alone, but mixed together, they make for something even greater. And it's this way of actually sort of playing with those metaphors to talk about where we are in this moment in American life and history.
Well, and I think, if I might, I think
Sure.
the one thing that we keep emphasizing in the book and in different chapters is the notion that that takes hard work.
Yeah.
You know, really mixing that salad
Yeah.
in a way that builds bridges, that creates tomato radishes rather than tomatoes and radishes.
Exactly.
It takes hard work.
One of the things that we're seeing is as we're becoming more diverse, we're also becoming more unequal in terms of income, wealth, the quality of schooling that's available to youngsters. Is there a link between the increasing diversity and the increasing inequality?
We are living with centuries, decades certainly, if not centuries, of durable inequalities, as Charles Tilly has called them. That is, those are not going to just go away. And those are written or etched in very hard, reified terms, right? We have hyper-segregation in neighborhoods. I live in Newark, New Jersey, and I see it all the time. I see the ways in which racial isolation, the architecture of segregation, and class issues go together and really create the inequalities and the map of inequalities. The post-recession recovery didn't begin to reach so many of those hyper-segregated neighborhoods, not just where I live, but all across the country. So on the one hand, we have that. And on the other hand, we have the potential, and I'm an educator, so I'll say we have the potential, if we educate those children, the children you described since 2011 who are now more racial and ethnically diverse than ever.
Right.
If we educate them, we can break through some of that hypersegregation and inequality.
Now, Dr. Lewis, one of the problems is that we're not doing nearly as good a job as we should be doing in educating them. Support for public education has been declining. It got clobbered in the Great Recession, and we have not even begun to make up some of the losses at that time. But also, just almost in general, there's less support for going all the way down to grade school, all the way up through college. And, I suspect that the reason for that is increasingly the students that would be educated in public education are black and brown students. Is that a legitimate thought?
I think partly it has to do with who will be educated. It also has to do with our willingness as a society to actually make hard choices. So if you think about three different moments over the last 100 years, the turn of the 20th century, where there was profound inequality there. I mean, we created the category of the robber baron for a reason. And there's this sense that men and women of exceptional wealth and means would be able to control and corral those resources for themselves. But over the course of the next 2 to 3 decades in the 20th century, the labor movement actually came afoot and gained some ground. Certainly by the 1930s, both the AFL and the CIO succeeded actually producing a living wage for most workers who were part of the union movement. When you think of what happened then, there was just, by the 1950s, there actually was an agreement between big labor and big business over how we would proceed with pension plans and retirement plans and other kinds of structures of regular increases in wages. And it was the assumption that you could get actually a working middle class job and have a middle class life coming out of World War II. At the same time, then, the economy began to shift, and we went from an industrial economy to a post-industrial, now digital economy. And what we've seen as a result of that is a heavier burden on actually education. So in a recent study by Tony Carnevale at Georgetown University's Center on Workforce and Education, Tony notes that 11.4 million Americans who have gained employment since the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, 8.4 million of them had a bachelor's degree or higher. 3 million had some college. Only 80,000 new jobs went to folks with a high school degree or less. And you sort of think then of what it meant, because at the same time we understand this, states then decided that if we're going to have to deal with what they refer to as entitlement programs, Medicaid and Medicare,
right,
and all, they would have to then shift the burdens. And so we've increased incarceration, we've increased payments to Medicare and Medicaid. There's some money's left over then for K through 12. And what we're seeing actually almost every state budget, and there's a recent study by the American Academy of Arts and Sciences that actually documents this, every state decided to balance its budget by reducing commitments to higher education.
So in it,
And then at the same time, this new generation of young people were seeking to gain access to higher education.
Right.
And then if we think about sort of alongside the economic and demographics and educationally, if we think about what the quality of life is for those black and brown children that you described who are not getting educated, they are in highly segregated schools. I read the other day a study by Gary Orfield at UCLA's Civil Rights Project. We, in the Northeast, K-12 schools are more segregated now than they were before 1968.
right,
So if we think about the importance of building a labor force among that exploding diverse population, if we think about the importance for democracy of building social ties across groups, of really leveraging that diversity. We talk in the book about essentially what Scott Page calls the diversity bonus in innovation,
right,
in problem solving. None of that will happen if we don't learn to go to school together.
the question becomes, with all this diversity, how do you begin to knit together leadership and alliances and that sort of thing that can build the sort of the political dynamic that's necessary to make progress? It would seem to me very difficult. Are you optimistic on this front?
Well, I mean, I think take this in chunks, right? So let's go back to the education, the educational setting. What we know from research and intergroup relations, among other areas, is that having people sit next to each other is not enough. If you think of 4-year-olds and look at parallel play, adults and late adolescents are capable of parallel play as well. I mean, they can actually bump up against each other, move in similar orbits without ever interacting. And so what we know from this research is universities have to be intentional about designing courses and other programs that actually bring people together to work on real problems, to actually try to tackle those things that are critical to their existence both on campus and off. That becomes then a lesson plan as well as a way of acting not only on those campuses but also outside. So if you think then moving from the campus to what they learn to outside becomes then the structure and the practice of being able to say, okay, how do we form alliances? How do we begin to actually identify the problem and that needs to be solved and worked on together in a different way? But if we don't start by actually being intentional when we have people together, I mean, it's one of these interesting things that we know. There are 2 institutions that actually help socialize young people after the age of 17 or 18. is college and universities and the military.
Right.
And so those two institutions then will have a disproportionate role, I think, going forward to actually come up with design programs that help us to build that leadership cadre to imagine then that we can actually move forward and we don't end up with a prolonged period of parallel play.
Do you guys feel like this is happening on the college campuses or on many college campuses in
I
the
think
US?
we are actually really trying on college campuses. I think one of the things that's happening is people are being more honest. And that upsets people.
Exactly.
I mean, so
Right.
there's a lot more, if you will, controversy in that sense. But I think it's really on the table, and that's the first step for any of
The
it.
controversy
Right?
would be inevitable, right? I mean, some people would
Absolutely.
get
This is hard
upset. You
work,
do
right?
need to engage, and
And I think one could argue that in our social political landscape, what's been happening is a kind of feeding of zero-sum thinking as opposed to a feeding of a sense of interdependence, that common fate is really there. Our democracy depends on common fate. If we don't feel that what happens to you will impact what happens to me, then we're not going to have a motivation to come together.
Right.
But the other thing I would add to I think Earl is so right in pointing to both the role of education and the military. The military's had a less pervasive role since the draft has gone away, ironically. But in addition to that, let's think about some informal, what I would call institutions of American life that are by choice. So let's think of faith contexts, different faith contexts, and the ways in which faith can be both intra-group bonding.
Exactly.
Your own faith gives you a sense of trust and motivation and security, but then interfaith contexts. How do we really go back to building those interfaith contexts? When I look back at Dr. King, and I think, again, in Newark, New Jersey, one of the most wonderful legacies was Rabbi Prince, who actually gave the speech right before Dr. King in the March on Washington.
1963.
And 63, and it was a speech about neighbor being a moral concept, not just I'm next to you. It's a concept of what happens to you will influence what happens to me and vice versa. We've got to get that back. The other arena that we've talked about a lot is the arts. How do we have storytelling so that I hear your story is actually not so different than my story? You know, some of the middle America white voters, non-educated voters who are being exercised to see the racial and ethnic diversity as a threat. In fact, if we get people to sit and listen to each other's stories, there's
Right.
so much similar aspirations there.
Nancy and I were part of our advisory board, and one of our colleagues was telling a story along these lines. and it was in Southern California, and it was a community meeting, and there always the thing that gets most voters upset is talking about raising taxes, right? And so this one gentleman apparently gets up in this meeting and goes, why should I want to have my taxes raised? My kids are out of the house. I mean, these are somebody else's kids.
Right.
I mean, why should I be interested, let alone want to invest in them? And then he sits down, and another neighbor gets up and turns to the fellow who has spoken and said, look, let me ask you a handful of questions. First, do you plan to retire? And the person said, yeah, I plan to retire. Do you ever plan to sell your house? And he said, yeah, I plan to sell my house. She said, well, if you think about it, investing in these kids right now means that they'll be in a position to buy your house. So investing in them is an investment in yourself. You just have to figure out then how that all fits together.
And you need them working in decent
Jobs.
jobs if you're going to pay for
Exactly.
this man's retirement or the
And
retirement.
Medicare and all the other
Exactly.
things. They depend
Exactly
on
right.
it,
And so that sense that there's a common purpose and a common cause.
And it's so easy to lose sight
It's
of that.
easy to lose sight. It's all about me.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
forgetting, no, it's about we and us because we are actually part of this. And my investment in you redounds to my benefit if I think about it carefully.
I would also tell people who sort of take this approach that you're talking about, that your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren are going to be living in this much more diverse
Exactly.
United States.
Yeah.
What kind of society do you want them living
Exactly.
in? You know.
Exactly.
But if we're talking about diversity, and you mentioned Dr. King in 1963 and the March on Washington, it's impossible not to talk about race. And we've made extraordinary progress since the 1960s, which is the period that I came of age in. But it does seem to me now that we're going backwards. Is that a fair statement, or do you disagree with that?
Well, it's hard to know. I was born in Virginia just in time for Brown 2. And so all deliberate speed framed my life. I went to segregated.
We're still waiting.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly.
I went to segregated
That's
schools
so speedy, right?
until I was in the 10th grade. And so I was part of what I refer to as the transitional generation. We were that first group of kids, black and white, who actually ever went to school together with one in large numbers. This is 1970, 71.
Right.
And so in this interesting kind of way, I'm reminded that the period of all deliberate speed was actually twice as long as the period of affirmative action, and that wasn't qualified by the Bakke decision.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's an interesting kind of way if you sort of think of this. And so race has always been there. And I actually would argue that it's hard to plot a straight line. But as someone who can still remember the segregated signs and all, that part has been removed. And so de jure segregation as we know it is an improvement over what was there before. So we may say it's de facto segregation in some areas, and it's certainly true in the public schools and in certain parts of housing. But race is that funny thing, right? It's perhaps the one social critter that we've created, and we don't actually know how to control it.
Right.
And so we all think we know something about the other.
Now, the premise of your book, and it's included in your subtitle, is that diversity is something that is good for the society, it's good for the individuals and the families, it's good for the economy. But it is a struggle, as you've been talking about here. Are you optimistic? Are we moving in the right direction, or is there reason to think that we will soon move in the right direction?
So I am by no means, as my friends all know, a classic optimist, and certainly not in a domain where the work is so hard to do. The social work, as I said, is so hard to do. But I actually look at the faces of the students at Rutgers University, Newark, and I'm optimistic. And the reason I'm optimistic is the perseverance of aspiration, the desire for opportunity created through education, for example, is so strong and yet so similar to what was true generations ago. And if we can just connect the current aspirations with the stories from the past, I think we will be able to remind ourselves that in fact, this diversity is not a threat, it's an opportunity.
Dr. Lewis, we have less than a minute, but tell me whether you're optimistic.
I'm very optimistic. But
very optimistic.
I'm very optimistic because actually I'm an American historian. So I started my accounting here in, probably 400 years ago.
We've been in a lot worse places than that.
1607 in Jamestown and moving forward, I think we can say we're far better off. But that optimism is also measured because I think we did all of ourselves a disservice to believe that with this diversity would also lead to a post-racial society.
Right.
We're not in a post-racial society. We're in a racially aware society, but we are the architects of that future, and we should be aware of it.
Well, we've run out of time. I'm so sorry, but I'm really happy that you guys came in. Dr. Nancy Cantor, Dr. Earl Lewis, it's been terrific.
Great, thank you.
We'll be back in a moment with a final word. I was reading an article in the New York Times Magazine recently, and a couple of paragraphs seemed to bring out in sharp relief the character of the man who is our new president. In 2005, the article says, Tim O'Brien, then a financial reporter at the New York Times, published the book Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald. O'Brien talked to sources with an up-close view of Donald J. Trump's finances, who concluded that the real estate developer's net worth was $150 million to $250 million, rather than the $2 billion to $5 billion Trump had variously claimed. Trump, who had courted O'Brien by taking him for rides in his Ferrari and private jet, sued O'Brien for libel in 2006. Trump called O'Brien a whack job on the Today Show, while, O'Brien says, continuing to curry favor with him privately. O'Brien's publisher, Warner Books, was also named in the suit and hired top lawyers who put Trump through an unsparing 2-day deposition. Asked about his finances, Trump was caught lying or exaggerating 30 times. The case went through 4 judges and was dismissed in 2009. Trump's take on the case was telling. I spent a couple of bucks on legal fees, he said, and they spent a whole lot more. I did it to make his life miserable, which I'm happy about. According to the Times Magazine article, Trump was even wrong about that. Warner Books spent less than Trump did on the case, and O'Brien spent nothing. There are, of course, many things that are deeply disturbing about the character of Donald Trump, and this is just one small example. But we should keep in mind, as we look at the ever-growing and ever more troubling accumulation of examples, that this is the kind of man we've elected president. It's very early in the Trump era, but not too early to recognize that we've made a terrible mistake. That's all for now. See you next time.